Welcome to the Stoic Tide. There's a kind of person who stays silent in a crowded room, not because they have nothing to say, but because they're thinking of too many things at once. They sit quietly watching the light fall across a desk, and somehow in that single beam of light, they see the flow of time itself. They hear one simple sentence and feel the entire world hidden behind it. They meet one gaze and read a whole chapter of trust, fear, and the things never spoken. People like this, we call them deep thinkers. They live more inside their minds than out in the world. A single thought can unfold into a universe of reflection. But don't mistake that depth for comfort, because with that depth comes solitude. For them, thinking isn't a habit. It's breathing. And that breath, if not mastered, can consume them. Part 1. Deep thinkers aren't complicated. They're just more honest with themselves. Most people look at a tree and see leaves, shade, maybe a breeze. But a deep thinker looks at the same tree and sees a lesson about life. They notice how the roots cling to the soil, how the trunk bends with the wind, how it keeps reaching always for the light. In every detail they find philosophy. A simple conversation becomes a study of emotion. A moment of silence becomes a question about human nature. Their mind is a storm of connections, constantly weaving, comparing, reflecting. Others live through action. They live through observation. Others speak to express. They stay silent to feel. And that silence, the very thing the world calls cold, is their language. Because only in silence can they hear the truth within themselves. That is both the gift and the burden of depth. To think deeply is to see the hidden layers of everything. A glance, a sentence, a pause, each becomes emotional data they can't ignore. Their mind is a labyrinth where meaning and feeling twist endlessly together. And sometimes they get lost inside it. That's the first burden of deep thinking. A careless word can echo for years in their mind. A fleeting look can keep them awake all night, not because they're weak, but because they see too much. They don't just remember events. They remember the texture of the air, the tone of the voice, the sadness hidden in the afternoon light. Psychologists call it depth processing, the ability to store experience not just as memory but as emotion. It makes them creative, profound, empathetic, but it also makes them tired because every experience leaves a scar that never quite fades. They can't turn off that sensitivity. They feel things no one else even notices, and sometimes they wish they could be a little more foolish just to live a little lighter. The second burden is the trap that comes with that same depth, the trap called overthinking. It sounds the same, but it's a completely different beast. Overthinking steals your sleep. Deep thinking awakens your soul. Overthinking asks, what if I fail? Deep thinking asks, why am I so afraid to fail? One is haunted by outcomes. The other seeks truth, but the line between them is razor thin. One moment of losing control, and a deep thinker becomes a prisoner of their own mind. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, do not pray for a lighter load. Pray for stronger shoulders, and deep thinking isn't a curse. It's a discipline. When guided well, it becomes the power of self-awareness. When left untamed, it becomes the spiral of self-torment. Music, Part 2, deep thinkers don't just analyze, they feel. In psychology, there's a term called metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. For most people, it's a fleeting moment of reflection, but for deep thinkers, it's where they live. They watch their own thoughts the way a scientist studies a storm, dissecting patterns, tracing origins, asking questions. They examine every emotion, every motive, not because they distrust themselves, but because they want to understand. Yet the price of understanding is seeing everything, even the parts of yourself you wish you couldn't. The more aware you are, the clearer the cracks in your soul become, and sometimes awareness itself hurts. Seneca once wrote, no one suffers from the things that happen, but from the way they think about them. Deep thinkers know this better than anyone. They know the mind is both the prison and the key. And every day they're learning how to master it, to walk the razor-thin line between depth and getting lost in it. There's a paradox. The deeper the mind, the easier it is to drown inside your own thoughts. You start seeing too many patterns, too many meanings, until even silence feels like it's speaking to you. It's like holding a microscope that's too strong. You start seeing details that were never meant to be seen so close. They analyze every action, question every word, and sometimes dissect their emotions until those emotions simply disappear. Epictetus once warned, do not try to understand everything. Some things are meant only to be felt. Deep thinkers must learn what most people forget, to rest in the present moment. Not every question needs an answer. Not every silence hides a secret. They often seek solitude not because they hate people, but because their inner world is so loud they need quiet just to hear themselves. You'll find them sitting alone in a cafe, eyes distant, lost in thought. But inside, thousands of ideas are moving like overlapping waves colliding in rhythm. Seneca once said, "No one is lonely who is in the company of their own thoughts." To them, silence is home. It's where they rebuild the order of the world piece by piece, and in that stillness they begin to understand themselves, humanity, and life itself. Music Part 3, The Awakening. When depth becomes wisdom. Deep thinkers don't just observe, they transform. They learn to turn pain into clarity, failure into lesson, solitude into strength. And in that transformation, they stop being people who simply live in their heads. They become the bridge between reason and compassion. Marcus Aurelius once taught, "When you face pain, say to yourself, 'I am not afraid of this because I understand what it is.'" That is the Stoic spirit, to face every emotion with calm awareness. No denial, no judgment. A deep thinker who learns this is no longer imprisoned by thought. They wield it like a blade of wisdom. Because those who don't learn to guide their thoughts end up trapped in the endless loop of analysis. But the Stoic doesn't think to escape life. They think to understand and master it. Deep thinking isn't about dissecting emotions. It's about transforming emotion into meaningful action. Marcus wrote in Meditations, "Do not waste energy on thinking unless you mean to act. So whenever your mind starts to spiral, ask yourself, what can I do right now? Am I controlling this thought, or is it controlling me?" That is the moment a deep thinker evolves into a Stoic thinker. They hold a rare gift, the ability to see beauty inside sorrow. They understand that everything fades, and that's what makes it precious. As Seneca said, "Nothing lasts forever," and that is precisely why everything deserves to be cherished. They see joy and loss as two notes of the same song. They don't fear change, they bow to it, and in that humility they find peace. They know how to be alone without feeling lonely. They know how to be silent without feeling afraid, because they've learned that in stillness the self returns. They walk alone, sit quietly in cafes, watch the world drift by, and feel life retelling its story through every passing face. That is Stoic silence. The kind of silence that is not weakness but power. The silence of someone who no longer needs to react to prove they exist. A young philosopher once asked his teacher, "Master, I think all day, yet I cannot find peace. Why?" The teacher smiled, placed a finger to his lips, and said, "You have never let silence answer you." The next day, the student sat by a lake alone. No pen, no paper, no questions, just the sound of the wind, the water, and his own heartbeat. And he realized deep thinking was never about talking to the world. It was about listening to himself until silence no longer felt like emptiness but truth. Conclusion: the depth within you is light. The world today celebrates speed, noise, and certainty, but deep thinkers bring the opposite. Patience, silence, and honest doubt. They slow the world down just enough for people to feel again, to think again, to live with meaning. And if you're one of them, don't ever apologize for your depth. Don't shrink your mind to fit small conversations, because you are the reminder this world desperately needs. You prove that thinking is an act of love, that silence can be strength, that sensitivity can be power. Not everyone will understand you, but the world still needs you. It needs people who dare to listen in an age obsessed with speaking. People who dare to feel in a world terrified of emotion. People who dare to look inward when everyone else is staring at a screen. So keep your depth. Guard it fiercely. Because in a shallow world, your depth is not a flaw. It's light. It's what helps others see. And if this message speaks to you loud and clear, stay with us on this journey. Subscribe the Stoic Tide, not for content but for practice.